Let's talk about the terrorism watchdog. This is independent review of terrorism legislation. His name's Jonathan Hall. He's a KC, and he has rejected a call from the Prime Minister to basically widen terrorism laws to include killers like Axel Rudakubana, the Southport attacker, to include people like him who have no necessarily specific ideological aim, who are not conspiring with other people to commit terror acts, but nevertheless was not only planning an attack on the school, but carried out that horrific attack on the Taylor Swift-themed dance class, killing 3 children and injuring 8 others, and children and 2 adults as well. Let's talk about this with Chris Phillips. He's the former head of National Counter-Terrorism Security Office. Very good morning to you, Chris.
Good morning, Julie.
Thanks for joining us. I have to say, when this was first suggested that we need to widen it because there's a concern that you can't actually track these people down, Axel Rudakubana, known to the authorities, concerns raised, turned up at school, threatening, goodness knows what, turning up with weapons, clearly looking at some horrific stuff online, but he didn't appear to have any specific ideology, so he didn't come under prevent. So there is clearly a problem, and we need to close that aching chasm that meant that those children lost their lives and others living with their injuries for their lives. But Jonathan Hall has ruled out Starmer's solution. Was he right to do so?
Yes, I think so. I think that there is a worldwide understanding, although not a complete definition of what terrorism is. But the terrorism is known as being the ideology. So you can, you have the violence or the threat of violence to an extreme point, but then the rationale for that violence is for ideological reasons or for political change, and that's well known across the world. And of course, the Terrorism Act, and when you use the term terrorism, people need to understand that this falls outside that, and it is important to remember, of course, that in the US they have hundreds of school shootings every year, and with a similar sort of thing, really. And
I mean, someone running around with a knife or a gun, by definition, people are terrorised. But when you talk about terrorism, there needs to be some sort of ideological motive, mustn't there, that for it to count as terrorism?
Yeah, exactly, and that's really important because it does show exactly why where this problem comes from, how we have to deal with it. And of course it also kicks in certain regulations, like the US will release information that they wouldn't release for other offences. So I think it's important that we understand what terrorism is, but you're right, this is a big gap that needs to be closed.
Well, indeed, and again, this is the issue. They're talking about loners who are fixated on violence, like clearly Axel Rudakubana was, and he talked about a massacre at his local school. Thank goodness his father had prevented him from getting in a taxi to go and do that. But basically, Jonathan Hall is saying this would overwhelm MI5 and other counter-terrorism bodies, simply because you'd encompass so many people. This is a bit of a worry to those of us going about our daily lives and hoping that our kids come home from school or a dance class or whatever. So what sort of body is needed to deal with that? Because we can't have a situation where this ever happens again. It will happen again and we won't deal with it, is my best guess. But we can't have a situation where, oh, well, you're clearly a threat, you're an absolute psychopath and you want to kill people, but you're not particularly al-Qaeda or ISIS or far right, so we'll just let you carry on as you were. That's obviously not an option anymore.
No, and I think Jonathan Hall's quite rightly said this really does fall into the lap of the police. Maybe something along the lines of the prevent strand that links into it, maybe, because these people change, and many of the people that have committed terror acts actually really they haven't known an awful lot about Islam actually, and they've just jumped on that bandwagon. So it's important that we have some work done on this, and of course it's most important that because we seem to have more and more very strange, mad people out there these days, that these people are dealt with properly.
Absolutely. I mean, Jonathan Hall has suggested creating a new non-terrorist offence of mass casualty attack planning. So basically people who are planning, sitting in their bedroom on their own or buying weapons, accumulating, whether it's chemicals or poisons or knives or guns, to plan a mass casualty attack, even though their motive is simply just they're a nutter or they're a psychopath, or they just hate someone at their school or office or whatever, that we need to have that extra law. I mean, that will be a simple solution, but I think most of us are pretty shocked and surprised to learn that law doesn't already exist.
Well, it exists in as much as murder is murder, and if you plot and plan murder, then you can be arrested for that. But the key thing is that we have a growing problem, albeit every year for the last 50 years, I think 2 or 3 people have blown their fingers off making plastic explosives, explosives. We've always had this problem, but now with the internet, I think it's growing and it needs to be dealt with. And we need another box of policemen, by the way, to try and deal with it.
Yeah, indeed. Chris Phillips, always good to talk to you. He's the former head of the National Counter-Terrorism Security Office. Thank you for that. Philip Ingram, look, you're a former senior military intelligence officer. You had to deal with these things. Pretty much every time we have one of these horrific attacks, whether it's an Islamist attack, a far-right attack, just a lone nutter like Axel Rudakubana, they're known to the authorities. They flagged themselves up. Yeah. And yet, so they're either on the list or taken off the list, nothing is done. What is the solution?
The breakdown here is that there was no agency picked up whenever Prevent didn't, and counter-terror...
It didn't come under Prevent.
It didn't come under counter-terror police, and it should have been local police and local agencies didn't pick up. That can be fixed quite quickly. Our counter-terror police are exceptionally busy. As of today, there are 900 active investigations into 3,000 people. Think of the police resources. These are people that the police and the security services believe are planning imminent terror attacks against us. And since 2017, they've stopped 43 late-stage attacks. Since 2018 alone, they've stopped 13 late-stage attacks. We don't hear about these because their measurement of success is nothing happens.
Almost by definition, we don't hear about the work that they do. And again, when we do find that they say, well, with this, we don't think this person is a threat, and then they go on and kill an MP or kill children, is actually they're comparing them with the other people they've got on their list who they believe is a greater threat.
Exactly, and on the watch list, there's tens of thousands on the watch list, and therefore you can't police all of them like that. You have
Here's
to
my top tip, though. Anyone who's on the watch list who is not a British citizen, not born and bred here, definitely don't think they should be here. That would be a good start. That would get rid of quite a lot of them, wouldn't it?
It would.